Yep. Looks good.
Says it's on, period.
Let's see what happens. Okay. So, get ready to go here. Let's see.
Yep.
It did exactly what I didn't want it to be the first time through, so I'm glad I didn't officially start. Good. Here we go. Okay, so thank you for coming. I appreciate you coming and spending time with me for a little while today. This presentation will probably take about a half hour of your time. And we're going to be talking about something very important, something that we all know about, but we might not necessarily know different psychological terminology for things, and it's hope. So we're going to be talking about hope. There was an evangelist named Hal Lindsey who said that man can live for about 40 days without food, about 3 to 5 days without water, for about 8 minutes without air, and approximately 1 second without hope. Hope is something that helps us persist in this life. It's something that makes us look forward to the future, whether it's the short term or the long term. Hope is what speaks to our future. So to begin, we have a video, and this video is from the point of view of a man who is homeless. He's a homeless drug addict, and it's this cat that comes into his life. It's actually a true story, but as you're watching this, I want you to think about the aspects and the elements of hope that are at work in this.
I've got to go to work, all right? Can't take care of you. I wish I could, but I can't. Look at the big world out there, waiting for you. Go and explore it, hey? That's it. Good boy. So long, Bob. Come on. It's silly now. What did I just say? You're going to get yourself run over. Hey, it's not safe out here. I mean it. You can't come with me. Seriously, you'd be surprised how much he understands. Hey, Bob. Come on, go back to the grass. Go on. Good boy. Good boy. What are you doing here? Hey, no, don't go over there. He's not even my cat. He's just followed me on to the bus. Haven't you? Hey?
Oh, lovely.
Is it okay that he's on here?
Oh, I don't know. Have you paid for him?
2 for 1? Hey, do you want to go up here? There you go. Is it good for you? Yeah. What are you doing following me into town, hey? Look at those, hey? Yeah, you're a lion. You're a lion. Yeah. They got nothing on you, mate.
Yeah, would this help, love?
That's perfect.
Oh, you've done it all.
But that's good, it's a bit thicker.
Yeah. Not too tight there.
No, I know. It's just if he gets spooked, in town, I don't want him to run off. He's not actually mine, he's a stray.
Oh, you don't look that straight to me.
Yeah, I know. Good boy.
Kind of a cute video. So in that, what did you see at work as hopeful? What seemed like it was hopeful in that video?
You could shoo the cat away and it would still come back.
Right?
Persistence.
Exactly. So there was persistence in having hope. So the man was kind of the source of hope to the cat then, in a sense.
I think it was going both directions
Yes.
too, though.
Yep, exactly. Did you have something you wanted to add, Merle?
Yeah, just proves that the cat would not give up. And when you have hope, you don't give up.
Right. If you have hope, you don't give up. That's one of the things about it. Cool. Sam or Cheryl, is there anything you want to add to?
I felt that the cat was able to get hope because each time that he approached the man,
Yep.
the man accepted the cat, didn't just ditch him somewhere, but
Right
he
on.
was persistent and
It's actually a movie. It's called The Street Cat Named Bob. If you want to watch it, and it's a book. It's amazing. One other thing I wanted to throw out there that I thought was kind of neat is that the people around their relationship also seem to be inspired by it. Like the woman at the bus stop. If you noticed her reaction, she looked at them like they were kind of foolish. But then the lady on the bus, she comes up with that shoelace, right? Like a heavier duty shoelace. So hope also affects people around you, and it inspires the people that are around you when you can have hope.
Right, because everybody in the bus had that same uplifting thing to see
Yeah.
the cat come on the bus.
Exactly, it was just kind of sweet. Exactly. So psychology has looked at hope, and there's a fellow that's kind of considered the pioneer of hope theory. His name is Charles Richard Snyder. He's written 6 books on hope. He died of cancer in 2013, I believe it is, but he wrote and edited like 232 articles on hope and what it means to have hope in your heart and forgiveness. He was a Methodist, went to a Methodist university. And so really his ideology on what hope is pretty basic. It's only 3 elements. And so if you're building any kind of foundation, it's nice to start with some sturdy bricks at the bottom and then expand upon that instead of getting overwhelmed. So when we look at this theory, think about how you see these 3 elements at work in your life and at work in the life of hopeful people or people who even seem hopeless. It's just something to kind of stage it. So hope theory. Hope theory has those 3 elements of goals, pathways, and agency. And we're going to talk about each just a little bit to make a little bit more sense. We all know what goals are. You can set goals that are short term, goals can be long term, goals can be outcome based, they can be based on the process that's happening, they can be results oriented. But I wanted to ask you all, what are some of the goals that you've set in your life that you've either seen come to pass or ones maybe that didn't come to pass the way that you thought they would?
Well, we had set a goal to move out to this area. I mean, it was a couple of years worth of getting there, but you know,
We had a lot of different branches that could have gone on, and we just ended up, we didn't pick one goal. We gave us lots of different ways that we could move out here, and different places we could end up being out here.
Yep.
And
so flexibility in the
flexibility.
goal.
Okay, so that's part which you're tapping into is another piece of the pathways, which we'll talk about in a second, how that could work out in various ways. But are there other goals that you can think of that you've set and accomplished in your life?
I had a goal to live to be 50, and I'm now 83. Good
So,
Lord did well by me.
yeah, you surpassed that goal.
Passed that goal.
Yep.
I have several goals with suppers and stuff, and I just like to see the church grow, and I see it growing, and the goal is to someday see the pews full again, and someday they will be.
I pray you were right.
Yeah.
That is the hope. I feel like we've grown really richly in spirit too, which is good. Do you want to?
I had a goal to get a farm and have some animals, and I've got the farm and a few animals, and it's been a goal that I've wanted for a long time, and now I'm achieving it. So.
Yeah, you are. You've got chickens and
Chickens
cats and
Cats
birds,
and birds
and,
and,
and horses and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. The next part is the agency. Now, you had tapped into pathways, so the pathways is the way that we get there, but the agency is the way that we think about things. So agency is not the way power, but the willpower. It's the willpower to get there. It's the motivated thoughts that we have that will get us to the place that we want to be eventually. in spite of obstacles that might arise that are physical or emotional. Can you think of a time in your life that you've had to have willpower in a situation to accomplish a goal that it is that you want to get done? A time that you've had to practice that willpower?
Well, the last certification or whatever you want to call it that I got was I became an enrolled agent, and you have to pass 3 IRS exams and you have to study a lot, and that just took a lot of time and a lot of work, and yeah, now it's his turn
Yep.
Yeah.
to do the same thing, and his is much more involved than mine is, his master's.
It's nice. That speaks to a motivation of hope of taking care of one another in it too, that you have each other to rely on,
Mm-hmm.
and that you help give one another willpower by sustaining each other. Anybody want to add on? Don't feel like you have to.
Mhm.
For the time that you've had to practice willpower. No, there's always, all of us have had that one. So agency we covered, goals. The last part is those pathways. The pathways that get us to where we want to be with our hope. You had talked a little bit about moving out here. It could have taken all kinds of different routes.
Oh yeah.
You could have landed in all kinds of different areas maybe instead of just this one.
And a lot of different ways, like we were looking at large houses that we would rent part of them, or we ended up in a very small house where we can barely fit company, much less us,
Right on.
anybody else. But it just a lot of different ways, newer houses, older houses. We had originally thought Cornish, but then we looked all around in the area. We're thinking right in town, but then maybe near. There's a lot of different permutations.
Yeah,
But-
absolutely. And that is one of the things that hopeful people have in common is that they're willing to think about different pathways to achieve a goal. They're willing to think different ways about a situation in order to make that goal happen. So in case a crisis arrives, you don't just say, okay, well, I can't make this happen the way I wanted, so now I just give up. That's not an attribute of hopeful thinking. We can all go there at times, but it's not an attribute of hopeful thinking. I have a slide for us with a quote. Could somebody read that to me?
Sure. A man devoid of hope and conscious of being so has ceased to belong to the future.
So what do you think that is saying? What does that say? Beyond the words.
Well, if a man or a woman doesn't have any hope, then they really don't have much of a future to look forward to.
Right?
Right.
Not a bright one anyways.
Yeah, you think of hope being forward-looking. It's always what's coming tomorrow.
Right.
So if you're devoid of hope, you don't belong to the future. So what are you doing here?
Right. That really struck me too. I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, that hope is really something that is future gazing. It's not gazing at the past because you can't necessarily change it unless you're trying to right a wrong. But that is still looking forward to the hope to try to right the wrong in the past or whatnot.
They had an article in the paper that was talking about the fact that death rates in younger people in Maine is rising more quickly than in the rest of the country, and they were attributing a lot of that to both the opioid addiction and to suicide. And both of those are people who don't have hope in my mind, because they don't have something to look forward to.
And even just those elements that we learned, I mean, it sounds so simple, the agency, the pathways, and the goals, right? But if you're not taught that as a kid, and then you have coping mechanisms to deal with things like abuse or drug addiction or different things in the home, and you don't have the ways, the tools to even think, like, am I thinking right? Am I acting right? Do I have goals? Then it's very easy to slip into that mass living. Yep. They call it failure to thrive. When you're at the nursing home, when people lose hope, they call that failure to thrive, and people will eventually die because they don't feel like their life has any more purpose or meaning.
As
So-
basic as working with livestock, it's the same thing.
Oh yeah.
You can tell when they give up,
Yep.
and when they give up, you have to. There's not something that you can do to fix that. You can't make them
Right.
want to get better.
Exactly.
You can't explain it to your goat.
You can't explain it. Exactly. especially with animals, I think.
Yeah.
But part of that, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's part of the thinking of how to get people to have hope, right? How do we help? How do we come alongside people and help them have hope when even we would feel hopeless in that situation? How do we be that person when all seems lost? Of course, we have faith, so we have that leg up. But when we're working with people who don't necessarily have faith, sometimes meeting them in their own language, it just gives us more, hopefully, tools to tap into. So it would be great if life just went the way that we wanted it to. That you set a goal, you think about it the right way, you do all the right things, and each goal is like checking off a box, right? And we just get there to our desired outcome. But we know that life does not work that way. That's not how it is. Things happen, things arise, always it seems like at the most inopportune time. And typically it won't be just one thing, it will be more than one thing. Or maybe we don't,
Always
it comes
three.
in three. Exactly, that's like the rule of threes. And I think part of that too is that when one thing hits us, it's not a big deal. But when multiple things hit us, we start to be like, wait a second, there's more than one thing going on here, and we start paying attention. In psychology, they call those obstacles stressors. So a stressor is an event or an experience from the environment that stimulates us to become stressed. It can be good stress, it can be bad stress, but in this case we're talking about the negativity, the negative stress. They've also found, research has found that stress is also associated with different ailments in the body. So if you think positive, if you pray, they've linked that to actually healing and to recovery. But if you're always thinking negatively, if you're always ruminating on the past or beating up yourself for past things that have happened or focusing on toxic relationships, they've seen a link with that to heart disease and things like stroke, even anxiety and depression, and some mental illnesses. I have a scenario for us to consider together. This is something actually, before we do this, I'd like to go back. I can't go back on this. I'm not going to try to. So don't look at the screen right now. But I want you to talk about for a second some of the stressors that we experience in our lives that come from within, and some of the stressors in our life that come from the environment. Can you give me an example of a stressor that happens that's internally created?
So I'll always want to